So there's me. And I know that somebody who's joined us is also representing the design industry. So from a bit of an innovative process, I have designed my own look in terms of masks. I'm not sure if it's entirely appropriate, but I'm sure that there's opportunity for a designer there to research what's going on and to see if we can't actually make ourselves look a bit better and so on. Okay, but in real life, I sort of look like this, except that I got some hair dye to do some lockdown hair, and now I don't look like this anymore. What I do is I do the monitoring and evaluation at Enterprise Room. Monitoring and evaluation is to analyze the projects, see if they're effective and what we are actually achieving via the project. Is the program working? Are we achieving what we're supposed to achieve, and so on? I have worked on some very big projects with Africa Innovation Summit and the World Health Organization, which has been fascinating to know the amount of creativity and business creativity, not just designer creativity, in Africa. And that really gives me confidence that we can get through this process and we can actually grow from it. I have done a lot of project and impact reporting, progress and impact reporting. I've done sustainability reports. I've worked on mines, looking at the stories of mines, how they've developed, and the various other sustainability issues that exist on a mine in terms of people, profit, planet, etc. I've analysed corporate culture, and I have been to a number of countries in Africa for my work and so on. And then I have lived overseas in other countries, and that's just about me. So now about Enterprise Room. I'm sure all of you know that we work on transformation through entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is driving transformation. It is one of the main drivers. And I know that we talk about economic growth, but in actual fact, it's been stunted at the moment, but recovery is available. One just has to think differently. The offerings of Enterprise Room, these are all generally the offerings: BEE, economic inclusion, policy review, etc. And we are all over the country, different percentages of reach and so on, and the number of businesses. So, for example, the majority will be in Gauteng, but we are all over the country, and in actual fact, we have quite a few developing in the Northern Cape as well. A little bit of information about us in terms of the number of jobs we've created over time, revenue increases, how many programs we've supported, and so on. So now I just want to give you an idea of what it is that we're going to discuss today, and that is preparing for the workplace. So the main things I'm going to cover are, in terms of preparing for the workplace and preparing your workplace plan, is exposure and risk. What are the risks that you are encountering in your work? The things you have to think about, how to implement this, and what it is that you need to do. So I'm sure you have been given the COVID talk and you've seen it on TV and so on, but it's just relevant in this environment where we're saying, okay, what is COVID? When someone coughs or exhales, they release droplets of fluid. They're so tiny you can't see them, but they drop onto the floor, the desks, the telephone nearby, tables, etc. And so you can't be too careful in terms of how you're preparing your office space, because as we are conducting our normal daily lives, and maybe the odd sneeze or somebody is infected, these droplets go all over our offices, and now we have to be acutely aware of actually preparing the office and keeping it clean. So I'll just go back one. Where I say at the bottom, people, seems that people over 40 have a slightly higher risk, and people with an weakened immune system, diabetes, lung disease, etc., they also have a vulnerability. Heart disease and some people with high blood pressure. The word comorbidity is used a lot, and comorbidity sounds like a terrible word, but it is just expressing this group. So if somebody has high blood pressure, they would fit into that category, and high blood pressure is extremely common. So comorbidity is the word that is used, but it has quite common things included under that umbrella term. So the first thing we have to look at is the risk. Now, if one of you may have been opening up, others may just be starting to open up, some may have been working already and so on. But I want to just say, I asked people when they joined the meeting that what businesses were they in, just so that I could get a couple of ideas. So when we're looking at the occupations, particularly in level 4, i.e. those who can go back to business, we're looking at what risk level and what exposure these people experience. And the exposure levels are very high to high, medium, or low. And I wanted to have a look at those risk levels, because it depends on the type of industry you are in and the type of contact you have with people. So in your respective organizations or in your respective work, do you need to be within 2 meters, that's 6 feet, of people who might have COVID-19, or you don't even know? Do you need to be within 2 meters? Is your working environment something that you work close together on? So someone I spoke to earlier, amongst other things, many businesses, does swimming. So in swimming, if you're teaching people to swim, you are close, you are touching them, you're holding them in the water. So think of every instance where you're passing something, how close you need to be, what type of job you're doing, and whether that puts you on the high, medium, or low risk level. So I just want to explain a few of these levels. And my slide thing is not moving. There we are. So the very high risk people are your healthcare workers, your doctors, nurses, dentists, healthcare and laboratory personnel handling specimens, you know, people taking the samples from during tests. And sadly, the people who work in the mortuary are still also in a high risk category. Even if the person has passed away, they can still contract COVID-19 from that person. Okay. But now it's something to think about. You may be preparing your workplace, but you may know a nurse. You may know a doctor. I was at the dentist yesterday, albeit for an emergency, but I was there yesterday. So I went to a high risk person who I had to be quite close to. So one can't think in isolation about these things. The medium exposure people are frequent or close contact with people who may be infected, okay? So how often are you within 2 meters of people who might have been infected? So that's if you're seeing clients. Are you having meetings across a boardroom table? In the manufacturing environment, are your machines far apart? How close are they? Are you mixing with people who've traveled? In this instance, we're saying international locations, but it could be interprovincial, you know, coming from a high infected area. And have you got contact with the general public, i.e. in schools, high population density work environments, consulting rooms, point of entry, access, security guards are standing there at doorways, meeting people over and over and over again. Your people in Pick and Pay working behind the till are exposed to people over and over and over again. So many of us actually fall into the medium exposure category. While we think we're working at home, we're still nipping off to the Pick and Pay. We may go into work every couple of days. Public transport, if you're taking public transport, you've got contact. So we're advising a 2-meter distance. I read that there's 1 meter distance, 1.5 meters distance, and 2-meter distances. So let's be very cautious about that, but and try to stay as far as reasonably apart that you can. But many of us fall into this medium exposure category. The next sorry, something happened to my slide there. The next exposure level is your low risk. People who don't require contact with other people, very minimal occupational contact with the public and other co-workers. So that's at the moment while we're working from home. It could be someone who works in a very isolated environment, answering the phone and so on, but not in a massive call center. So it's people who work in isolation. Of the people that I introduced myself when they joined this morning, none of us are working, I think, in this very low exposure area. Now, the legislation, having covered those risk areas, the legislation, and this is a bit of a mouthful, the legislation is based on the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which has to be read with the hazardous biological agents regulations. And the Occupational Health and Safety Act basically says that employers must provide and maintain, as far as practically possible, a working environment that is safe without risks to the health of employees. And that is a general statement that is used irrespective of whether we've got COVID or not. So that is the obligation of the employer. Now, someone I said hi to works in a printing environment. So you will have inks and a lot of paper and so on, and chemicals that you're mixing with your inks to get the colors and the printing and so on. So you'll be familiar with chemicals and hazardous biological agents and so on. And you may, in that printing environment, have done some HACCP tests, hazard testing and so on. I think it's called HACCP. Anyway, the point is, whether you've done that or not in your environment, you now have to do it for the purposes of COVID-19. So whether you're in the printing and you've got chemicals on the side for ink and you've covered all your chemical risk analysis and your, keeping things in safe places, the point is you have to redo this in order to do a risk assessment for your working area, your business and so on, in preparation for going back to work. And that has to be done in the context of COVID-19. So what it is you've got to think about. So in the next screen, I've done a sample risk assessment. What is the hazard? The hazard is... Yes.
Can you please display your proposal? I think the screen left us a while back.
Okay, let me see what I can do. I'm going to share again. Tell me if it's sharing.
Yeah, we can see.
Yes, it's sharing.
How far back do you want me to go?
No, you can continue where you are.
Oh, okay. So here. So what is it? What is the hazard? The hazard is the spread of COVID-19. That's the basic hazard that we're looking at. And the risk assessment is to say who could be harmed, who do you have to think of in your respective working situations? Staff, how many staff do you employ? Where are they coming from? Do they walk through the door? Do they come into a main entrance of a building, go up in a lift, come out on a particular floor and then come into your office? Do you work from home? Do they walk in and out of your front door? Who are your visitors? Where do they come from? Are you ordering takeaways? Have you got cleaners coming in? Do you have cleaners that you have at work, or are you outsourcing the cleaning? Who are your contractors? Are they delivering things to you? Do you have drivers? Are they delivering things to clients? And do you have vulnerable groups working for you? People over 60, that's not retirement age. Pregnant workers. Have any of them got existing underlying health conditions? So there's an enormous amount to think about. What are the tools that you use? Does someone use a hammer, put it down, and then someone else pick up that hammer? So then we have to have the controls. So for each of the potential risks that you've identified, i.e. staff, visitors, etc., there has to be a control in place that you would implement in order to deal with that particular risk. And then there may be additional controls. So while you may advise hand washing, you can then say it must be for 20 seconds. Again, I've seen the 20 seconds, excuse me a minute. I've seen ads that say 20 seconds. I've seen 40 seconds of hand washing. Now, the other thing to think about is actually we're a water-stressed country. So washing your hands for 20 seconds or 40 seconds or 2 minutes under a flowing tap is also using up water. Do you need the water on for the full time? Can you put the soap on and rub the soap in and dip your hand in every so often to rinse off and have the tap off in between? So there's a lot of additional things to consider, because that would be using your electricity in terms of heating the water. It would be using quite a lot of water. So somebody said they have 29, 30 employees. So 30 employees washing their hands for 2 minutes several times a day means several hours of running water. So while I'm not saying in any way don't wash your hands, I am saying that you can put a notice up on the mirror and say, if it's possible, turn the water off while you're rubbing that soap onto your hands, and then put the tap back on and rinse off. And then part of the risk assessment is to say who is responsible for this, when will it be implemented, and has it been done? And you can keep that responsibility going for as long as possible, as long as we need it as well. On my next slide, is it still sharing? Can you still see?
Yes, I can see.
Yes. Are there any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to carry on. Things to think about in that risk assessment that you're going to implement. You've got to prepare the workplace. So what is your workplace like? Has it got stairs? Is there a banister going up the stairs, a handle going up the stairs? That has to be sanitized. You've got to sanitize the tables, the desks, the chairs, the floor, the windows, because people are always going up to windows and leaning against them. Anything you lean on. So one of the ways to do it is to sort of walk your way through your office environment or your manufacturing environment and look at where the risks are. Part of the work plan is when are you opening? You have to state the date of your opening and your office hours. So will your office hours change? Will you let your employees come in a little bit later so they avoid peak hour traffic? Will you shut a bit earlier so that they can go home and avoid peak hour traffic? Who is it that can work at the office? Because we're still in lockdown. Level 4 doesn't mean it's not a lockdown, it's just a different level of lockdown. So you have to identify who can still work from home. And this is the way things will change in terms of working from home. Have you got network access, etc.? Can you see how many widgets you're producing in the manufacturing environment? Can you look at the amount of productivity you're going through? Who can work at home? Okay, you can be doing admin, data capture, but in time, do you want to actually have access to seeing your staff in the office through cameras? Do you want to log into your network and actually work online on certain things? But for now, who can work at home and who has to be at the office? What is the timetable? I think someone mentioned, was it Chantal earlier, working at 30%, and then you'll be introducing more people into the office, into the manufacturing environment. So as you introduce more people, how does that utilize your meterage? So I was watching an architect, a program the other day with an architect, and in these offices where there's long tables that people work at with a screen in front of them, they've allowed a meter, but now they have to, and so there are 3 people, actually, that he measured, there were 3 chairs next to each other that can now only be 1 person working in that space. So even our current working spaces may have to change. And I'm thinking of Zeka. Our current workspaces may have to change because what was once an acceptable distance from one another and access to a shared telephone can't work anymore. How are your staff going to work? Do they need face-to-face meetings? Will you spread them out across the office? You have to, by law, provide 2 face masks to the employee. So the employer has to provide 2 face masks. If the staff member loses the mask, then they're going to have to buy their own and so on, but you must provide 2 face masks. You need an access register when you walk into the office, so you can say who came in and they need to answer just a couple of COVID questions. You need to test the temperature of the person, and then if they answer yes to any of the symptom questions or have an elevated temperature, they actually can't come into the office, they must be sent home. If you're having meetings, you have to put people far apart in the meetings, leave a box of tissues nearby in case someone needs to cough and they can take a tissue. You've got to sanitize the table, and don't forget, you've got, depending on the environment in which you're working, have you got a whiteboard? Are you using pens to write on the whiteboard? You've got to sanitize those pens. What are you doing about visitors? Are you allowing visitors into your office? If they don't have a mask, are you going to provide them with a mask? You're going to tell them to bring a mask beforehand. Visitors can't be left unaccompanied. Have you got kitchens in your respective work areas? Are you letting people use cups and saucers? Will they have to bring their own crockery, etc.? Where are the bathrooms? What are the cleaning procedures of the bathrooms? And are you rotating staff? Does someone come in the morning and then leave and someone come in the afternoon? So those are the kinds of things that you've got to think through along with walking through your office in terms of actually doing your risk assessment. Once you've done a risk assessment, the rest is relatively easy. But it's a question of walking around in your respective environments and saying, I have just opened the door with a handle, so that handle has to be sanitized. I'm now walking down the corridor and holding onto a railing. The phone rang and I picked up the phone. I pushed open another door. I went to the water machine and pressed the water button to actually get a glass of water or a cup of water. So now you've actually touched a door handle, a railing, a water button. You now go to your desk. You are touching your mouse, your keyboard. You pick up the phone. People are coming near you. Work through it in a practical way in terms of this risk assessment, and use these ideas to prompt you and so on, and develop a cleaning checklist. So to the right of the screen is a cleaning checklist, you know, and when will your offices be cleaned? And then someone ticks it off daily. You also need a COVID compliance officer, somebody who is accountable. Now, if you're on a sort of shift basis, or alternatively, not everyone's going into the office at the same time, or maybe only going in a couple of days a week. What we did at Enterprise Room is we do have a COVID compliance officer, but we have an officer on duty that day. So whoever's booked to go in, we take, say, a member of staff, we've trained them, and we say, okay, you're the on-duty person, but you report into the COVID compliance officer, and they have to check that the registers are completed, etc. So you need an office registered, an access register, maybe a visitor's register, or combine it. You need policies on how to work in the office space, how to use food, crockery, cutlery, or bring your own. You'd need a meeting register so you can say who attended that meeting. Now, in terms of delivery drivers, are you using your own or are you getting couriers in? You need to make sure that they are in their own PPE and that you've sanitized the door handles and the steering wheel and so on. And for every off-site visit, keep a record of who it is you're visiting, because all of these registers are to do with traceability. And they have to be kept for 30 days at least, so that if in the event of any of your employees or somebody who came to your office gets COVID-19, they come back and they trace it to you, then they can at least advise other staff, okay? There are some compensation COID issues in terms of being covered as staff members. And some people may get tricky and start taking it further in terms of it's possible that one could have a civil lawsuit, but let's not go there for now, because you can prove that you have done your cleaning checklist, that you did do a visitor's register, that you did send people home if they were known to have the virus, and so on. You knew who attended the meeting. The person who attended the meeting observed you doing certain things and acknowledged that. So you're keeping yourself covered. Your driver wears his mask, gloves, whatever is required for his particular business. So for a transport business, you would need to have maybe a docket that as you are delivering things to people, that they do tick off and say, this person was wearing a mask, they were wearing gloves, they were doing this, they did have sanitizer, they didn't come within 2 meters of me, etc. You need a bathroom checklist, you need to know about your shift workers, and I would check COID. I heard a beep. Okay. Here is a sample workplace policy which we can share with you. And you have to describe the organization, say how many employees and so on, who the compliance officer is and what you're going to be doing in the office. You have to state when you're opening, when your office hours are, and how the staff will work there. And then here we have a sample access register, which can be amended as you want, but we've said, you know, what's your name, surname, ID, where are you from, where can I contact you, were you wearing gloves, mask, what was your temperature, yes, no, to some very simple questions, and did I allow you access. Here we have a sample meeting register where you will see that it says the work surface has been sanitized, The cloth paper towel used to wipe the surface has been disposed of in a nearby bin. And this is saying that whoever signs this in the meeting acknowledges that this has been done, so you don't have to keep repeating yourself. Cleaning checklist. Have you done the glass doors? Have you done the handles? Have you done the windows, etc.? And what it is that we need to do, we need to communicate and communicate and communicate. There are posters, notices that you can put up. You can make them artistic. You can use the WHO posters. You can do whatever needs to be done. You saw that when I introduced myself, I had taken a photo and I was wearing a mask and I'd drawn on it and I'd drawn some flowers on it. You know, there may be an opportunity to make this into a fashion statement. You never know. You have to educate and talk about it. We found that a lot of people in our businesses, perhaps from far away, there's a mixed opinion in so much as some of the business people say that the people they observe in the community are not taking things seriously. Talk about it so that the word spreads. You have to practice what you preach. You can't walk around with no mask and say, where's your mask? You've got to buy the right PEE, get the boxes of tissues, get the paper towels, and so on, get the sanitizer. Don't think that everybody can bring their own to the office. People will have their own handbag storage, but please, as employers, you are responsible. Now, the word be disciplined and comply is a double-edged sword in so much as, yes, I'm saying be disciplined. Make sure you don't forget things. You know, I've run outside sometimes and I thought, oh, heck, I forgot my mask. I've run in to get it. You know, I was getting used to it. But you can discipline people. It is going to be part of the disciplinary procedure that should somebody not be wearing their mask, that it's actually now part of your code of conduct, and that you can discipline them if they're not wearing their mask. And ultimately, this is because we care about each other and we care about our businesses. And this is one of the short posters that you could put up, but alternatively, we can send you some others. But these actually talk about the basics, which is about sanitizing before you come in, wearing your cloth masks, having soap and sanitizer to keep your hands clean, wearing gloves if you're handling money, if any of you are cash businesses. And don't forget also ventilation. And I'm just moving to the right now where I'm saying also wash fruit and veg with water. Someone hands you an apple. Their hand might be sanitized, but also wash the apple. Any questions?
Sue, just wondering if any of those sample policy and sample documents you posting would be available. They look like really nice tools and great shortcuts to get to the finish line. Will they be available at all?
Yeah, with pleasure. I will. They are available. Just email me. They need to be completed in so much as they will have some statement there, but we won't know what time you want to open your offices and so on. So kind of fill in the blanks and so on. But I think you can make them short, sharp, and succinct and so on. But they have to be detailed. That's the thing that I found, is that every eventuality has to be covered. Like the cleaning list leaves no stone unturned, you know, if I can possibly think of it. So yes, with pleasure I'll send them, but don't take them as is. Change and add detail. Make them very to the point, but add the detail.
Perfect. That's awesome. Good head start. That's awesome. Thanks, Sue.
Pleasure. Any other questions in terms of your businesses and so on? Is anyone impacted by this in terms of not COVID-19 in terms of their business, but do any of these workplace preparations initiatives impact your business? Do you have to change the way you work?
So I can answer that one, Sue. I'm Chantal. I'm the one with the printing business, and yes, I think everybody's business is affected, isn't it? And what we've been really struggling with is we're less staff at the moment because because we're not getting revenue. We've been closed, and there's so much admin that COVID-19 has created in terms of compliance and just actual survival that these tasks, and we all want to protect our staff when we want to be compliant. If anyone walks through the door and wants to check we're operating safely. To be honest, we've been open for I think 6 days now, and I still haven't finalized the compliance stuff for health and safety, and that's a risk, and that's a risk to us as a business and our staff for their safety, even though we are practicing good things, but it's a lot of work. So I really do thank you, Sue, and Enterprise Room for sharing your tools and your advice, because it just helps us be compliant and get the paperwork up and get operating quicker and sharing our knowledge. So yeah, thank you for that.
If any of you are in the same position, we'll put this package together. I'll attach the legislation, and also, in the legislation is the permit that you require in order to go to work in the first place. And then basically it's a question of printing it and putting up posters and things around the office. It's the repetition, it's the reminder of everything. I read an article the other day that inspectors will be coming around. They can't possibly check all 1.8 million businesses that are apparently going to be reopening because of this, but they will look at hotspots, and they will look at industries that really have to safeguard themselves, and so on. So while we've just said inspectors won't be everywhere, they'll be somewhere, and so on. And the fines are 3,000 and upwards. So, and then of course there's the damage that we may be doing to other people if we're not considerate and caring, and that's the numbers are growing and so on, and it's a terrible balance to try to keep in terms of numbers and actually flatten the curve and keep the economy going. So if it means sending out these things to you, helping with the paperwork, that's one thing done so that you can get on with your job at hand. Okay. So if anyone else needs any
Thank you.
tips, or maybe if you're in a particular industry, transport or something like that, and you need to be directed to specifics for transport. I don't know what you're transporting. Maybe there's some specialist areas there and so on that you have to work through. Yeah. Okay, good luck, everybody.
Yeah.
And yeah, as I say, going back to the creative space, as I say, I drew a flower on my mask. I'm sure it'll come off later when I sanitize it, but and put your blinking, your logo on the part of your mask. Make the most of this and show how safe you are and what a good business you are and how you're out there, and try and market yourself through, masks could become the new t-shirt with sayings on it. You never know. Get yourself marketed. All right, everybody. Thank you very much, and all the very best. Good luck.
Thanks so much, Sue.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Sue.
Thank you. And bye.
Sorry, has everyone put their emails up there?